My daughter called at 2 a.m. whispering, "Don't open the door. He's outside." I looked out. My son-in-law's car was idling in the dark. He'd spent 9 months inside my home, my accounts, my life. That night, I found out exactly what he came to finish. My name is Russell Holt. I'm 67 years old, and 9 months ago, I buried the woman who made every single one of those years worth living. Gloria. 42 years together. I sold a ranch 4 years back. Knees weren't what they used to be, and Gloria wanted to be closer to Naomi. So we moved to Clover Ridge, a quiet suburb outside of Nashville, into a brick house with a covered porch and a backyard big enough to remind me of open land without making me miss it too much. It was a good life, a settled life. Then Gloria got sick, and everything I thought I understood about family started to come apart at the seams. She passed in October. The grief didn't hit me all at once. It came in waves, quiet ones mostly. An empty chair, her reading glasses still folded on the nightstand. The way the house smelled different without her moving through it. I told myself I was managing. I lied to myself pretty well for the first month. That's when Derek Carver started coming around. My son-in-law, Naomi's husband of 5 years. On paper, Derek was everything a father could want. Financial advisor, clean-cut, soft-spoken, always said the right thing at the right moment. The kind of man who shakes your hand and looks you in the eye and makes you feel like you're the most important person in the room. I noticed early on that the feeling didn't last much past the handshake. But Naomi loved him, and Gloria had always said, "Don't make her choose, Russ. If you push, she'll dig in deeper." So I kept my opinions to myself. After the funeral, Derek started stopping by 2-3 times a week. Groceries. Small repairs around the house. He'd sit at my kitchen table, hands folded like a preacher, and say things like, "You shouldn't carry this alone, Russell. That's what family is for." My son Travis, who lives up in Cincinnati working as a paramedic, called every Sunday without fail. But Derek was here, and there's something about presence that makes a grieving man lower his guard when he shouldn't. 3 months in, Derek offered to help organize my finances. Said he wanted to make sure nothing slipped through while I was dealing with the loss. I let him. I was tired in a way that sleep didn't fix, grief tired, bone tired, and Derek made it all sound reasonable. He brought a folder. He used words like estate planning and streamlined access, and I signed things I didn't read carefully enough. I knew it then. I just told myself it was fine. Then he installed a security camera system. "For your safety," he said, tapping at his phone. "If anything happens, we'll know immediately." It sounded modern, responsible, the kind of thing a man who cared about his father-in-law would do. I didn't ask who else had access to the feed. I should have asked. The fog started about 6 weeks after he installed the cameras. Small things at first. I'd walk into the garage and forget what I came for, find my truck keys in the refrigerator, wake up with a heaviness I couldn't shake before noon. I figured it was grief, maybe age. Derek had started bringing me a daily vitamin supplement. "Good for memory and circulation," he said, setting the bottle on the counter with the quiet confidence of a man doing a favor. I took them every morning because I was trying to take care of myself. Because Gloria would have wanted me to. I stopped taking them 2 weeks before that night. Something fell off. I couldn't name it, just a rancher's instinct. The same thing that tells you a storm's coming before the clouds show up. Within days, the fog started to lift. That's when I started paying attention to things I'd been too hazy to notice. It was a Tuesday in late March, just past 2 in the morning. I'd fallen asleep in my recliner with the television on low, some old Western playing, the kind Gloria used to tease me about. My phone buzzed on the armrest. "Naomi." I picked up on the first ring. Her voice came through in a whisper so thin, I had to press the phone hard against my ear. "Dad." A pause. "Don't open the front door." Another pause, longer. "And please, don't text Derek. He can't find out I called you." I was on my feet before she finished the sentence. I crossed the front window and pulled the curtain back an inch. Derek's black SUV sat at the curb with its lights off, engine running, just sitting there in the dark like it had been there a while, patient and still. I could see the glow of a phone screen through the windshield. My stomach dropped. He hadn't come to check on me. Whatever he was here for at 2 in the morning, it wasn't concern. "Naomi," I said quietly, stepping back from the window. "Where are you right now?" Her breath was unsteady. "I'm safe." "But Dad," "He's been planning something. And I think tonight's the night he tries to make it happen." I looked back through the gap in the curtain at that idling car. The glow of his phone. The way he wasn't moving, wasn't knocking, wasn't doing anything at all. Just waiting. I set my jaw and moved toward the back of the house. "Tell me everything," I said. "I want to back up." Because what happened that night didn't come out of nowhere. And if I'm being straight with you, there were signs I should have caught sooner. After Gloria passed, I did what a lot of men my age do. I kept moving. Cleaned the gutters. Fixed the back step. Mowed the lawn on schedule. Staying busy felt like staying upright. The problem with staying busy is that it leaves gaps, and Derek Carver had a talent for filling gaps. He showed up the Thursday after the funeral with 2 bags of groceries and a calm that felt almost rehearsed. Naomi was with him, red-eyed and quiet, and I wasn't going to turn either of them away. Derek moved through my kitchen like he already knew where everything was kept. He made coffee, set out food, and sat across from me with his hands folded on the table. "You've been carrying this ranch owner mentality your whole life, Russell," he said with a half-smile. "Fix it yourself, handle it yourself. But you don't have to do that anymore." I remember thinking the observation was a little too precise for a man who hadn't known me that long. But grief makes you generous with people who show up. So I let it go. The visits became routine. Twice a week, sometimes 3 times. He'd bring things, coffee, supplements, occasionally a casserole for Naomi. He started handling small logistics. A bill here, a renewal notice there. When he offered to set up automatic transfers to simplify my monthly expenses, I said sure without asking for the details. I was tired. Not lazy, tired. There's a difference, and people who've lost a spouse understand it. About 6 weeks in, he brought a box of equipment and installed 4 cameras. Front door, back door, driveway, kitchen entry. He walked me through an app on his phone that could pull up any feed in real time. "You fall," he said matter-of-factly. "I'll know before the ambulance does." I appreciated the thought. At least I told myself I did. Why I didn't ask was whether the app was on my phone alone, or his too. The fog started around Thanksgiving. I'd walk out to the garage and stand there trying to remember why I'd come. Found my reading glasses in the freezer once. Woke up 3 mornings in a row, convinced I'd heard Gloria's voice from the kitchen. I chalked it up to grief, to age, to not sleeping well. Derek's supplements sat beside the coffee maker every morning. A ritual he'd established, so casually I'd stopped thinking of them as something he'd introduced. They were just part of the morning now. Travis called every Sunday from Cincinnati. Solid kid, always had been. But one Sunday, I reached for my phone, and Derek was already holding it, glancing at the screen. "Travis can call back," he said smoothly. "You sat down to eat." I told him I could talk and eat at the same time. He smiled like I'd made a small joke and set the phone face down on the counter. By the time I got it back, the call had gone to voicemail. The next morning, I found a text sent from my phone to Travis that I had no memory of writing. "All good here. Talk next week." I hadn't sent that text. I started paying closer attention after that, and the clearer my head got, especially once I quietly stopped taking Derek supplements, the more things didn't line up. He had access to my email. He knew my bank login. He'd rearranged my filing cabinet in the den to make things easier to find, and I couldn't locate 3 years of property records that had been there since we moved in. And the cameras he'd installed. I realized I'd never once checked whether the app on my phone actually worked. Derek had set it up. Derek managed the notifications. Derek knew everything the cameras saw. I'd handed a stranger the keys to my house and told myself it was family. That's the part that kept me up at night, even before Naomi's call. Not the anger. I'd get to that. The part that kept me up was the question of how a grown man, a man who'd run a 1,000-acre operation and negotiated cattle contracts and buried his wife with dry eyes because she'd made him promise to hold it together, how that man let it happen inch by inch without noticing. The answer, I think, is that grief doesn't make you stupid. It just makes you tired enough that someone patient and careful can walk right through the door you forgot to close. Derek Carver was very patient, very careful, and I was done letting him walk through anything. She told me everything in pieces, the way people do when the truth is too heavy to hand over all at once. Derek had left his laptop open on the kitchen counter that afternoon. Naomi had walked past it reaching for her keys and caught a name on the screen. Her name, connected to a document she didn't recognize. She stopped. She read. And what she read changed everything she thought she knew about the man she'd married. It was a draft petition. Legal language, formatted, nearly complete. It named me, Russell Holt, as the subject of a guardianship proceeding. It listed memory lapses, disorientation, diminished capacity to manage personal and financial affairs. It referenced a scheduled psychological evaluation set for the following morning at 9 a.m., with a Dr. Ellison at a private clinic Derek had apparently used before. The petition named Derek Carver as proposed guardian with full authority over my property, medical decisions, and finances. "He's been building this file for months, Dad," Naomi whispered into the phone. "There are notes, dates, incidents he wrote down, things he says you did or said that showed confusion. I don't even recognize half of them." My jaw tightened. He fabricated a record, or exaggerated one. Her voice faltered. "The supplements, Dad. I found the bottles in his car. The real label. They're not vitamins." I stayed quiet and let that land. "I looked them up," she continued. "High doses over time can cause exactly what you were experiencing. The fog. The forgetfulness. He was engineering the evidence. I crossed to the kitchen and stood in the dark, hand on the counter, thinking about every morning I'd taken those capsules without question. A rancher knows better than to drink water from an unknown source. I'd forgotten that lesson inside my own house. Did he see you reading the laptop? I asked. A pause. I don't know. I closed it and left. But his location sharing app was on my phone. The one he said was for emergencies. I turned it off, but if he checked before I did, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I moved to the front window again and looked at the idling SUV. Derek hadn't knocked, hadn't called. He was just sitting there, patient as a man who believed he had already won. There's something else, Naomi said quietly. I found a folder in his home office. Old documents, different names, a different county. Dad, I think he's done this before. That was the moment the cold in my chest became something harder. Not fear, resolution. I told her to stay where she was, lock her doors, and not contact Derek under any circumstances. Then I went to the hall closet and dug past 2 boxes of Gloria's books until my hand found what I was looking for, a compact digital recorder I'd used years ago for ranch business meetings when I didn't trust my notes. Battery still held. I checked it twice, slipped it into my shirt pocket, and moved to the den. Behind the bottom shelf of Gloria's reading cabinet, beneath a stack of seed catalogs she'd never gotten rid of, I found the burner phone Travis had pressed into my hand last Thanksgiving. He'd gripped my wrist and looked at me straight. I've seen what isolation does to people, Dad. Just keep it charged. I thought he was being dramatic. I owed him an apology. I powered it on. 3 bars. I didn't call Travis yet. Not until I had something solid. Instead, I texted Naomi from my regular phone. Stay put. Recorder is on. If I say front gate, call 911. She replied in under 10 seconds. Understood. Be careful. I wasn't interested in being careful. I was interested in being thorough. I set the recorder to live and moved back toward the front of the house just as 3 quiet knocks landed on my door. Measured. Polite. The knock of a man who had rehearsed this moment. Russell. Derek's voice came through the wood, smooth and calm. I know it's late. I just need a few minutes. I stood 10 feet from the door and said nothing. Let him talk. Naomi's upset, he continued. She's not thinking clearly right now. I'm worried about both of you. A pause. I just want to make sure you're okay. In 31 years of ranching, I dealt with buyers who lied to my face, brokers who shorted contracts, and neighbors who moved fence lines and claimed they'd always been there. Every one of them used the same tone Derek was using now. Reasonable, concerned, the voice of a man who wanted you to believe he was the solution rather than the problem. I pressed record and waited. Derek knocked, twice more after the first set. Still measured, still patient. Then his voice shifted, just slightly, the way a man's voice shifts when he realizes the script isn't going the way he planned. I know you're awake, Russell. The light in the kitchen was on 20 minutes ago. I stayed back from the door, recorder running in my shirt pocket, and kept my breathing steady. Through the front window, I could make out his silhouette on the porch, tall, hands at his sides, head tilted like he was listening for movement inside. I'm not here to cause trouble, he continued. Naomi is confused about some things she saw. I want to explain before this gets out of hand. I almost said something to that. Almost. But I'd spent 31 years knowing when to hold and when to act. And this wasn't the moment to act. This was the moment to let Derek Carver show me exactly who he was. He tried the sympathetic angle next. I know how hard the last 9 months have been. Losing Gloria, being alone in that house. I've been worried about you. We both have. A pause. The appointment tomorrow is just a precaution. A doctor who can help make sure you've got support in place. That's all. Just a precaution. The same tone he'd used when he installed the cameras, when he took over my bills, when he handed me those supplements every morning. Everything was always just something small and reasonable. Then I heard a second voice, low, male, coming from the side of the porch. Not Derek. I moved to the corner of the living room, where I could see the edge of the driveway, without being visible from outside. A second figure stood near the fence line. Big across the shoulders, dark jacket, weight distributed like a man used to standing around waiting. Brandon. Had to be. Derek hadn't come alone. I took the burner phone from my pocket and sent Naomi a single text. 2 of them. Stay ready. Her reply was immediate. Understood. Derek knocked again, harder this time. The politeness was thinning. Russell, if you don't open the door, I'm going to have to call for a welfare check. I'd rather not do that. It doesn't have to go that way. A welfare check. That was the play. He'd call it in himself, frame me as the problem, and by the time officers arrived, he'd be standing on my porch looking like the concerned son-in-law who'd been trying to help. Any reaction I gave, anger, raised voice, refusal to cooperate, would go into his file as evidence of the instability he'd been documenting for months. I recognized the trap. I stepped around it. I moved quietly through the dark kitchen to the side door off the laundry room. The one Derek had fixed for me back in January because the latch was stiff. I checked it now. The latch moved too smoothly. No resistance at all. He hadn't fixed it. He'd made it easier to open from the outside. I shoved the dryer in front of it, then stacked 2 toolboxes against the dryer. It wouldn't stop a determined man for long, but it would make noise. I went back to the hallway, positioned myself where I could see both the front door and the laundry room entrance, and held the recorder steady. Derek's voice rose slightly from the porch. "I'm going to make that call, Russell. Last chance." I finally spoke. Not loud, flat, and even, the voice I used when a hand came at me with a problem that needed settling, not comforting. "You're standing on my property at 2:30 in the morning," I said through the door, "with someone I didn't invite, after installing cameras in my house that you still have access to. And you're telling me this is about my welfare." Silence on the porch. "I've been recording this conversation since you knocked," I added. Every word. Another silence. Longer. Then Derek's voice, quieter, some of the smoothness gone. "That's not necessary, Russell. This is family. Family doesn't show up in the dark with backup." I heard him exhale. Then, lower, meant for the second man, not for me. "Go around back. Side door." I was already braced against the wall when the laundry room went dark with movement, and the dryer shuddered against the door frame with a heavy impact. The toolboxes held for 2 seconds. Then the top one crashed to the floor. Brandon was inside my house. The laundry room door swung open hard, and Brandon came through it like a man who'd done this before, shoulders low, moving fast, one hand out to brace against the wall. He was maybe 32, thick through the chest, wearing a dark jacket and work boots. No mask, no gloves. Just a man who'd been told this would be easy. He pulled up short when my flashlight hit him square in the face. I was standing at the end of the hallway, feet planted, recorder running in my shirt pocket, and the flashlight raised chest high, beamed steady on his eyes. I hadn't backed up. I hadn't reached for anything else. I just stood there the way you stand when you've decided you're not moving. Brandon threw one arm up against the light and squinted. "What the?" "Stop right there," I said. Not loud. Ranchers don't yell at animals they're trying to move. They speak with certainty and let the animal decide whether to test it. "You are inside my home without permission. That is a criminal offense in the state of Tennessee. I suggest you think carefully about your next move." He blinked against the beam. "Man, just calm down." Ethan said. "Derek," I corrected. He caught himself. "Derek said you'd." "He said you weren't going to be a problem." Derek was wrong. I raised the flashlight slightly, so he had to look down to avoid it. "What's your last name?" "What?" "Your last name," I repeated. "You're being recorded." "I'd like it for the report." That landed. His jaw tightened, and his eyes shifted to the side, the look of a man recalculating what he'd walked into. From the front porch I could hear Derek's voice, slightly raised. "Brandon, what's taking so long?" I didn't move. Brandon took one step back, toward the door. "Look, I'm just doing a favor for a friend. That's all." "Trespassing isn't a favor," I said. "It's a felony." I tilted the recorder slightly outward, so the mic faced him more directly. "Say your name for the record. Might matter later when the DA asks who authorized you to be here." That did it. He took 2 full steps back into the doorframe and glanced over his shoulder toward the side yard. I followed him to the threshold. Not outside, just far enough to keep the light on him. On the front porch, Derek had gone quiet. Then from the side of the house came the second man's voice. Lower, a little older. Doors blocked. "Brandon, you clear?" Brandon looked back at me. Something shifted in his expression, the arrogance draining out, replaced by something closer to embarrassment. He was a man who'd been told to walk into an empty house and find a confused old man. He'd walked into something entirely different. "I'm leaving," he muttered. "Through the same door you entered," I said. "And tell your friend out front that if either of you steps back on this property tonight, the next conversation happens with officers present." He went. I watched him move across the back lawn until he disappeared around the fence line. Then I shoved the dryer back against the laundry door, pulled the toolboxes flush against it, and walked back through the kitchen. From the porch, Derek spoke again. Lower now, some of the calm gone from his voice. "Russell, whatever Brandon said, that wasn't what it looked like. He was just making sure you were safe." I positioned myself near the interior wall where my voice would carry through the door, clearly. "You sent a man into my house at 2:30 in the morning to make sure I was safe." I let the silence sit for a moment. "That's your story. You're twisting things." The smoothness was fraying now. "You're upset." That's exactly the kind of distorted thinking I've been documenting. The evaluation tomorrow is designed to help people in exactly this state. "The evaluation tomorrow," I said, "with a doctor you've apparently used before, at the clinic that specializes in fast-tracking guardianship proceedings." I paused. "I've been doing some reading, Derek." Turns out those records aren't hard to find if you know where to look. Dead silence. Then, where did you hear that? Doesn't matter where I heard it. What matters is I've got on tape. I moved to the window and looked out. The second man, whoever he was, had drifted back toward Derek's SUV, hands in his pockets, posture uncertain. The clean operation Derek had planned was coming apart at every seam. "You were making a serious mistake," Derek said, and for the first time all night the pleasantness was completely gone. Just a flat, cold statement. The voice underneath, all the rehearsed warmth. "I have documentation going back months. I have a doctor lined up. I have a legal filing that is 90% complete. You think one night of playing hardball changes any of that?" I let him finish. Then I said, "I think it changes who's on a record saying what." I held the recorder up toward the door, a symbolic gesture he couldn't see, but I needed to make. "You just told me about the documentation, the doctor, and the filing. On tape. At 2:30 in the morning. Outside a house you sent a man into without permission." A pause. "I've been in negotiations my whole life, son. You just handed me everything I need." Derek said nothing. I sent Naomi the words "front gate" and put the phone back in my pocket. Somewhere in the distance, the first siren started. The siren was still 3 or 4 minutes out when Derek made his last attempt. His voice came through the door, quieter, stripped of the professional warmth, which almost made it more dangerous. "Russell, think about what you're doing. Naomi chose me. She built a life with me. If you blow this up, you blow up her life too." I stood in the dark hallway and felt the pull of that. Not because it was true, but because it was the kind of thing a man says when he knows where the soft spots are. Naomi had chosen Derek. And some part of me had always wondered whether pushing back on him would cost me my daughter. Then I thought about the folder she'd found. The other names. The other family. "You used my daughter to get to me," I said. "And she's the one who called to warn me. She already chose a side tonight. It wasn't yours." Silence from a porch. Then the second man's voice drifted over from the driveway. Impatient. Lower class than Derek's careful diction. "Ethan, man, there's a unit coming down the block." "Derek," I said through the door, loud enough for the recorder to catch it clearly. "Your associate just called you Ethan." A pause that lasted exactly 1 beat too long. "That's a nickname," Derek said. "Is it?" I replied. 2 sets of blue and red lights swung around the corner of Clover Ridge Drive, washing across my curtains in steady pulses. I heard Derek move on the porch, not leaving, repositioning, getting ready to perform. I went to the front door, unlocked the deadbolt, and opened it. Not wide, just enough to be visible, standing in my own doorway on my own property, flashlight in one hand, phone in the other. Derek stood 4 feet away with both hands raised slightly, already building the picture. Reasonable man, concerned family, cooperative. The first officer stepped out of the cruiser with one hand near his belt, eyes moving quickly across the scene. Late 40s, heavy set, steady. "Everything all right here?" he called. Derek answered first. "Officer, thank you for coming. I've been worried about my father-in-law. He's been experiencing some confusion, and I wanted to make sure." "His name is Derek Carver," I said clearly, over Derek's voice. "He came to my home at 2:30 in the morning with 2 other men. One of them entered through my side door without permission. I have audio recording of the entire incident." The officer's eyes moved to me. "Are you the homeowner?" "Russell Holt. This is my property. I've lived here for years." The second cruiser pulled up. A younger officer stepped out and moved around the front of the vehicle, taking a position at the edge of the driveway where he could see both Derek and the man near the SUV. Derek lowered his voice and took half a step toward the first officer. "He's been under significant stress since his wife passed. There's a medical evaluation scheduled for tomorrow that his family arranged because we've had real concerns about his cognitive." "You arranged it," I cut in. "Without my knowledge or consent. With a doctor whose clinic your legal contact has used in at least 2 prior guardianship cases." I turned to face the officer directly. "I have the appointment confirmation. I have audio from tonight. And I'd like to file a report for unlawful entry." The officer studied me for a moment. Not the way people study a confused old man, but the way they study someone they're deciding whether to trust. Whatever he saw, he made a decision. "Sir," he said to Derek, "step to the driveway, please." Derek's jaw tightened. He obeyed, but his eyes didn't leave me. Cold and flat in a way his face had never shown in my kitchen, at my table, in all the months he'd sat across from me pretending to be family. The younger officer moved toward the second man near the SUV. "And you, stay where you are." I stepped back inside the doorway and called Naomi. She answered before it finished ringing. "Dad, are you okay?" "I'm okay," I said. "Police are here. I need you to come." Her exhale was so long I thought she'd been holding it for hours. "I'm already in the car." I looked out at Derek standing in my driveway under red and blue light. Hands at his sides, composure almost intact, already working on whatever story came next. Almost. The recorder in my shirt pocket had everything. The first officer's name was Briggs. He was the kind of man who moved without rushing and listened without interrupting, which told me more about his competence than a badge ever could. He asked me to walk him through the night from the beginning, while his partner kept Derek and the second man separated near the driveway. I did it the way I used to explain a complicated cattle deal, chronologically, without editorializing, letting the facts carry the weight. The 2 a.m. call from Naomi. Her instructions. Derek's car at the curb. Brandon's entry through the laundry room. The conversation through the door. The recording. Briggs listened with his notepad open, but barely looked at it. When I finished, he asked one question. How long has your son-in-law had remote access to your security cameras? Since November, I said. He installed the system himself. Briggs wrote something down and looked up. Is the system still active? I walked him to the front porch and pointed to the small black camera above the door, the one Derek had mounted himself, aimed at the entry and half the driveway. The green light was on. He's been watching this whole time, Briggs said. It wasn't a question. That would be my assumption. Briggs turned to his partner and said something I didn't fully catch. The partner walked over to Derek and spoke quietly. Derek's head turned toward the camera, then back. A fast, controlled reaction, the kind of micro-expression that people think no one notices. I noticed. Briggs asked to hear the recording. I played the full sequence. Brandon identifying himself as acting on Derek's instructions. Derek's voice through the door, announcing the evaluation and the documentation. And the moment Derek told his associate to go around back. Then the part I've been waiting to use. Derek's voice, flat and cold. I have documentation going back months. I have a doctor lined up. I have a legal filing that is 90% complete. Briggs stopped writing and just listened. When it ended, he looked at me with the calm expression of a man who had just heard something useful. Mr. Holt, do you have a family member who can come be with you tonight? My daughter is on her way. My son is in Cincinnati. I haven't called him yet. Call him, Briggs said simply. Then he walked toward Derek. I stepped back inside the doorway and dialed Travis on the burner phone. He picked up on the second ring. Voice alert despite the hour. Paramedics learn to come awake fast. Dad. He heard something in the silence before I spoke. What happened? Derek happened, I said. I need you to come. There was a pause, not hesitation, decision-making. I'm leaving in 10 minutes. I went back to watching through the sidelight window. Briggs was speaking to Derek in a measured voice, and Derek was doing what Derek always did, answering calmly, gesturing minimally, projecting the image of a man being very patient with an unfortunate misunderstanding. I'd watched him use that manner on me for months. It was impressive, technically, like watching a machine that had been calibrated for one specific purpose. The problem was the recording existed, and a recording doesn't respond to charm. Derek's associate, the second man, whose name I still didn't have, was sitting on the hood of the SUV with his arms crossed, talking to the younger officer with the energy of someone who very much wanted to be somewhere else. Brandon had not returned. Briggs came back to me. Mr. Holt, your son-in-law states that he called ahead and that you agreed to a conversation tonight. He did not call me, I said. He texted my daughter, threatening language, and drove to my house with 2 men at 2 in the morning. My phone log will show no incoming call from him tonight. I pulled up my call history and turned the screen toward Briggs. Nothing. Briggs nodded. He also states the medical evaluation scheduled for tomorrow was arranged with your knowledge and consent. It was not. I kept my voice even. I have never spoken with a doctor, never signed a referral, and was not informed of the appointment until my daughter found the confirmation on his laptop tonight and called to warn me. I paused. I'd also like to point out that the clinic he selected has a documented relationship with a legal firm that specializes in fast-track guardianship proceedings. That's not a coincidence. It's a pipeline. Briggs studied me for a moment. How do you know that? My daughter found a folder in his home office. Prior cases. Different names, different counties. This isn't the first time he's run this play. Something shifted in Briggs's posture. Subtle, but real. He made a note, then looked up. We're going to need a formal statement, Mr. Holt. And I'd strongly recommend you contact an attorney before tomorrow morning. Already planning to, I said. Naomi's headlights swept across the lawn as she pulled into the driveway. She got out fast, moving toward me, and then she saw Derek standing by the cruiser and stopped. They looked at each other across 15 feet of driveway, and I watched the last of whatever she'd held on to dissolve from her face. Not anger. Something quieter and more permanent. Recognition. Derek tried to say her name. She turned away from him and walked to me. She put her arms around me, and I held her the way I'd held her when she was small and the world had been too large. Firm and without words, because some moments don't need them. I'm sorry, Dad, she said into my shoulder. You call me, I said. That's all that matters. Behind her, Briggs was telling Derek that he was being issued a trespass warning for the property, and that his associates were being identified for the unlawful entry report. Derek's composure was holding, but it was holding the way ice holds in March. You could see the tension in it, the effort it took to keep the surface intact. He looked at me once more before he got into his SUV. That flat, cold look. The real Derek, the one that had been behind the handshakes and the groceries and the carefully folded paperwork the entire time. I held his gaze without blinking. Then his headlights came on, and he backed out of my street. And I went inside to wait for Travis and make coffee and start writing down everything I remembered while it was still fresh. Travis arrived at 4:15 in the morning with 2 coffees from an all-night diner outside Nashville, a duffel bag over one shoulder, and the expression of a man who had spent 3 hours on the interstate running through scenarios. He walked in, set the coffees on the counter, looked at Naomi sitting at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a mug, and didn't ask any questions. He just pulled a chair out and sat down. That's the thing about Travis. He'd seen enough in his years as a paramedic to know that sometimes people need you present before they need you informed. We sat there for a few minutes, the 3 of us, the kitchen quiet except for the refrigerator hum and the occasional car passing outside. Then Naomi set her mug down and started talking. She told us about the laptop, the petition, the doctor's name, the prior case files in Derek's home office, 2 of them, different counties, different targets, both elderly widowed men. In one case, the man had been placed under full guardianship inside 60 days. In the other, the case had been contested and eventually dismissed, but the man had spent 4 months fighting it with his own money and health. Derek had a system. He'd refined it. Travis listened without moving. When Naomi finished, he said quietly, "How long has he had access to Dad's accounts?" "Since October," I said. "At minimum." "And the house cameras?" "November." Travis looked at the camera above the kitchen entry, the one Derek had installed last fall, small and black, and positioned with a clear line to the back door, as well as the table where I signed documents. His jaw worked once. "He watched you sign things," Travis said flatly. "He could see exactly what you did and didn't read." The thought had occurred to me already, but hearing it said aloud made it concrete in a different way. Naomi reached in her bag and set her phone on the table, screen up. She'd taken photographs of Derek's laptop, the petition draft, the evaluation confirmation, the prior case files, and a thread of text messages between Derek and a contact saved only as ER. The messages went back 4 months. Dates, observations, notes about my behavior that Derek had recorded and transmitted, references to the supplements, increased to full dose, responses consistent, and a message from 3 weeks ago that read simply, "Timeline moving up. Property value confirmed at current assessment." Travis read that last one twice. He had the house appraised. "Without my knowledge," I said. "Dad." Travis looked up. "This house is worth close to $800,000 in this market. You know that, right?" I'd known roughly. I hadn't thought much about it. "That's what this is about," Travis said. Not angry, precise. The accounts, the guardianship, the whole setup. He knew exactly what you're sitting on. Naomi's hands tightened around her mug. "I didn't know about any of it. I want you both to know that." She looked at me directly. "He kept the financial stuff completely separate from me. I thought he was being helpful. I thought." Her voice broke on the last word and she stopped. I reached across the table and put my hand over hers. "I know. I should have seen it." "He was careful," I said. "Careful people are hard to see until they stop being careful." I paused. He stopped being careful tonight. Travis was already on his laptop, pulling up the Tennessee State Bar directory. "Victor Aldridge," he said, turning the screen toward me. "Lorraine mentioned him to me last Thanksgiving. Said he handled a case like this a few years back. Said he was the kind of lawyer who didn't wait for things to happen." Lorraine Payne. My neighbor 2 doors down. Former ICU nurse, sharp as a tack, and one of the few people who'd looked at Derek during Gloria's memorial and said afterward, with characteristic bluntness, "That man smiles too much for someone who barely knew her." I hadn't called her tonight. I should have. "Call Aldridge in the morning," I said. "First thing." Travis nodded and kept writing notes. Naomi was quiet, turning something over in her mind. Finally she said, "The other 2 men, the ones tonight. Brandon and whoever the other one was. What about them? If Derek paid them, if this was organized, that changes the legal picture, doesn't it?" She looked at Travis. Travis leaned back. "It changes it from a domestic dispute over an old man's paperwork into something that looks a lot like coordinated elder financial exploitation." He paused. "Which in Tennessee carries felony charges." The kitchen went quiet again. I thought about Derek's face in the driveway. That cold, flat look before he drove away. The look of a man who still believed he had options. He did have options, just fewer than he thought. Get some sleep, I said to both of them. 2 hours at least. Tomorrow starts early. Travis closed the laptop. Naomi picked up her mug. And I sat at my kitchen table in the house Gloria and I had chosen together, in the town we'd moved to so our daughter could be close. And I thought about how a man builds things over a lifetime. A ranch, a marriage, a family, a home. And how another man could spend 9 months quietly trying to dismantle all of it from inside. Then I thought about the recorder in my shirt pocket and the photographs on Naomi's phone, and Travis sitting 3 feet away with his sleeves rolled up and his pen moving. Derek Carver had planned for a confused old man alone in a dark house. He'd gotten something else entirely. Victor Aldridge answered his phone at 7:15 in the morning on the first ring, which told me either he was already awake or he never fully slept. His voice was dry and direct. The voice of a man who had spent 20 years as a financial crimes detective and another 15 translating that work into courtroom victories. Travis had called him first, explained the outline, and handed me the phone. I gave Aldridge the specifics in the same order I'd given them to Briggs. Chronological, factual, no embellishment. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a pause of about 4 seconds. The recording is clean? He asked. Clear audio. Brandon naming Derek. Derek stating the filing was 90% complete and that he had a doctor lined up. Derek's voice instructing Brandon to go around back. In the prior case files your daughter photographed. 2 of them. Different counties. One resulted in full guardianship. One was contested and dismissed after 4 months. Another pause. Mr. Holt, I need you in my office at 9. Bring your daughter, the recordings, the photographs, and any documents you signed in the last 9 months that you didn't fully review. He stopped. All of them. I'll be there. One more thing, Aldridge said. Don't go to your bank alone. Wait for me. He hung up before I could thank him. Lorraine Payne knocked on my door at 7:45 with a covered dish and the expression of a woman who already knew something had happened. I'd lived next door to Lorraine for 4 years, and I'd learned she had a radar for disturbance that most people didn't develop outside of emergency medicine. I told her everything over coffee while Travis ate, and Naomi sat quietly, holding her mug with both hands. When I finished, Lorraine set her cup down and folded her hands on the table with the deliberate calm of a woman processing a diagnosis. The supplements, she said. Did you keep any of the bottles? I looked at Travis. He was already on his feet, moving toward the cabinet where I kept them. There were 3 bottles left. Travis photographed each one and bagged them in Ziploc bags from my kitchen drawer. Lorraine read the handwritten labels, and her expression darkened. I want these tested, she said. I know a pharmacist at Vanderbilt who does independent composition analysis. If what's in these bottles caused the cognitive symptoms you described, that's not just fraud, that's a physical harm claim. She looked at me steadily. That changes the charge level significantly. Naomi made a small sound. He was dosing my father. Systematically, Lorraine said. Not unkindly, but without softening it either. That's what the evidence suggests. We drove to Aldridge's office at 8:45. Me, Travis, and Naomi in Travis's truck. Lorraine following in her own car, because she insisted and I'd learned not to argue with former ICU nurses. Victor Aldridge was 62 years old, compact, gray-haired, with the careful eyes of a man who had spent decades looking at things people try to hide. His office smelled like old paper and coffee, and he didn't offer small talk. He reviewed everything in under 40 minutes. The recording, the photographs, the documents I'd signed, the 2 prior case files. When he finished, he leaned back and looked at me over his reading glasses. Derek Carver isn't his real name, he said. The room went quiet. I ran the prior case files while you were driving over. He turned his laptop to face us. The name on the second contested case, the one that got dismissed, lists the petitioner's representative as a man named Ethan Greer. The physical description in the complaint filed by the elderly respondent matches your son-in-law exactly. He paused. Different county, different name, same method. Travis's jaw tightened. He's a professional. He's been doing this at least 3 times, Aldridge said, that we can document. There may be more. He looked at Naomi. Your marriage may not be legally valid, depending on what name he used on the certificate. Naomi stared at the table for a long moment. Then she looked up. What do? We go to the bank first, Aldridge said. Then we file a criminal complaint with the DA's office and request an emergency injunction blocking any guardianship filing in your father's name. He closed the laptop. And we contact the counties where the prior cases occurred. Because if this man is operating under multiple identities, those families deserve to know. He stood up and reached for his jacket. Mr. Holt, he said, you mentioned that your late wife's voice is still with you sometimes. The observation surprised me. It is. Good. He picked up his briefcase. Mine is too. It's useful. He said it without sentimentality. Just a fact between two widowers who understood that some things don't leave. Let's go protect your house. 4 months later, I was sitting on my back porch in the early June heat, coffee in hand, watching a pair of cardinals work through the feeder Gloria had hung from the oak tree the first spring we lived here. The yard was the same. The house was the same. The third step still squeaked. Some things hold. Derek Carver, whose legal name turned out to be Ethan Greer, with a prior identity before that which Aldridge's contacts in 3 counties were still untangling, was facing felony charges in 2 jurisdictions. Coordinated elder, financial exploitation, unlawful entry by proxy, identity fraud. The DA in Davidson County had taken the case seriously from the first meeting, partly because of the recording, partly because of the prior case files, and partly because Brandon, facing his own charges, had given a full statement in exchange for a plea arrangement that included mandatory cooperation. Brandon confirmed that Derek, Ethan, had paid him $400 to come that night, that it wasn't the first time he'd been hired for similar work, that there had been at least one other address, another elderly man, another dark driveway. The police were still working on that one. The bank had frozen the authorization request within the first hour of my visit with Aldridge. My accounts were secured, the administrative access Derek had added to my camera system was revoked, and a new security setup, one I controlled and no one else, was installed by a company Lorraine recommended. Lorraine's pharmacist contact at Vanderbilt completed the composition analysis of the supplement bottles in 3 weeks. The results confirmed what she'd suspected, a combination of compounds that, at the dosage Derek had recommended, produced exactly the cognitive symptoms I'd experienced. Fatigue, memory disruption, mild disorientation. Enough to be documented, not enough to be obvious. That analysis became the centerpiece of the physical harm claim Aldridge filed on my behalf. Naomi's marriage to Derek Carver was legally void. The name on the certificate didn't match any verified identity. She'd cried when Aldridge told her, not for the marriage, she said, but for the time. The years she'd spent trusting a man who had chosen her specifically because she was the door to me. She moved back in her old room for 2 months while she found her footing. We had hard conversations about what she'd missed, about what I'd swallowed to keep peace with a man I'd never trusted, about Gloria's voice in both our heads saying variations of the same things. We didn't resolve all of it. We didn't need to. We just kept talking. Travis drove down from Cincinnati 3 weekends in a row, which he hadn't done in years. He and Naomi fixed the back step together one Saturday afternoon, and I watched them from the porch and thought about all the years I'd spent on open land and understood something I hadn't quite put into words before. That what a man builds isn't the acreage or the structure. It's the people who know how to come back. Victor Aldridge called me in May with an update on the civil suit. He told me what the house appraised at $840,000, accounting for recent market movement. He said it in the flat tone of a man reading a number off a page. I said thank you, and we moved on to the legal timeline. The money wasn't the point. It never had been. The point was that it was mine, bought with years of work, and built into a life with a woman I loved for 4 decades. And no man with a smooth handshake and a manufactured file was going to sign his name to it. I finished my coffee and listened to the cardinals. Gloria had always said cardinals were the most confident birds in any yard. They didn't hide in the branches or wait for better weather. They came to the feeder in plain sight and took what they needed without apology. I understood that better now than I used to.